on to Ken. Does anybody have questions about Tom's work? Okay, that's good.
You touched on this a bit, but how do you confront and incorporate man-made objects or remnants that you find into your work?
Well, everything in the catacombs is man-made. And when I first went to Rome, I had been working in the Adirondack Mountains for 25 years, and this is an example of one of those pieces. I wanted to be sure to include one of those. And I would, and it's near where my wife's family had a little tiny hovel that they bought for $1,100 in 1944 from the milkman. And it's on a lake. And I would go off into the swamp that's nearby and live with the uncountable black flies, and it rains every day, and I would work there under a tarp that my wife made for me as well, because I was starting to complain that I would have days where I would work on a watercolor in the rain, and the watercolor would be going just fine, and then all of a sudden it would go whoosh, and it'd be completely gone. And in this world, I'm getting back to your question. In this world, I've seen so many things, but no people. And I've become very familiar with roughly 100 miles of where I've been hiking and traveling and working. And the topography is made up of a series of trees, and you know that there are still a few cultures in the world that worship trees, and I do. And the iridescent mosses, the water, the labyrinths made by these ancient yellow birches whose roots are visible, enable me to experience in solitude. And solitude is everything for what I do with my work, as much as I love to teach. I feel like I'm very fortunate because I have 50-50. But when I'm there, I've seen, I had a bald eagle. I think everybody should experience this. I had a bald eagle that flew it sounded like a train. Its wingspan was over 10 feet wide, and it flew over my shoulder and landed on a branch as close as you are, and looked at me, and decided that I was not tasteful. And I've also seen a mother deer give birth about the distance from me to you. And I've seen all kinds of amazing creatures, and I'm very friendly with the spiders and the snakes. And so there's a road between where the camp is located, down by the lake, and then you go up the hill, and it's a steep hill, and then there's a road, and then you enter into the forest. And that road becomes a threshold. You can literally step into the forest and experience this onrush of all these things coming at you, mostly unseen forces. And then you can step back and it's gone. And so when I was chosen by RISD, for God knows what reason, because I was far too young, to run their European Honors Program, I very reluctantly, we avoided the Colosseum at all costs. And after being there for about a month, I remember saying to Susan, well, let's make our obligatory walk to the Colosseum. And the moment that I stepped in, and I'd been really wanting to work in the catacombs, but it was virtually impossible. And you will be told that it's impossible to get permission. And that's why I consider myself very fortunate that I've earned their trust, but I did it very slowly. And they've never heard of RISD, and they've never heard of Wellesley, and they've never heard of America. They've never heard of any of this stuff, and they have no concern about it at all. and back then it wasn't, there weren't bars around it, so you could actually step into the Coliseum on the outer rim. And the same thing that would happen, I would put my foot inside, and I would be this onrush of all these unseen forces. And then I would step back, and they would be gone. And so I knew that that was my first home. And so I started working surrounded by the gypsies, who I got to know. And I think I'm the only American that's ever been regularly invited out to the gypsy camps. And there is a socio-political quality to what I do, but it's not what I'm doing in my work. The gypsies would, these little children whose job it was to steal things from people, like money, would come up to me, and they would be short, and my easel would be up here. And I'd tilt the easel so that they could see it like this, and then they would run their finger very slowly around the edges of the shapes in the most primordial way. Think of the Cycladic figures and the dominance of the outline. And they would run their fingers, and then they would understand what it was that I was working with. It was that combination of the visual and the touch that was so, I learned so much from them. And then I also was there when the cats were still thousands of cats. And they, unfortunately, tragically, they succumbed to a cat HIV. And now there are many fewer cats. But I used to watch the cat people who would come at 6 o'clock, and they would lay out newspapers in a ritualistic manner, and they would put the spaghetti that they would get from restaurants and put it in little circles, concentric circles, and then they would put little milk into tuna fish cans, and these were street people who were doing this, right? And I got to know these people. Some of the alcoholics, I remember one day I was painting at the Coliseum on the outside, had no permission to do any of this at this point. And I heard this sound that was the sound, and it was an unearthly sound like I'd never heard before. And it was a man who had an enormous amount of liquid in his stomach. And all of a sudden it came gushing out right next to me. And I had that moment of, do I stay next to all this puke, or do I leave? Anyway, but eventually I got to know the archaeologists. And now I'm circling back to your question. And I got to know the archaeologists, and they became very interested in the kind of obsessiveness that I have. And again, the obsessiveness came from my dreams. And the dreams had been going on for 25 years. And here I was working in these places that I had dreamed about. And they were not only dreams that were very specific, but the smells, and smell in dream is relatively rare, but the smells and the chromatic nature of them and the tactility and the non-peripheral vision nature of some dreams were beginning to occur. And so I started to work in these spaces. And the archaeologists, again, became interested in helping me because I looked sort of helpless. I have no Indiana Jones genetic component. And so they started inviting me inside. And eventually, like circling down deeper and deeper and deeper, they gave me permission to work in the underneath regions of the Colosseum, which is the only part of the Colosseum that has survived the ancient world. It has been destroyed by fire 3 times. If you can imagine, it's made of stone, but it's been destroyed by fire. And the bottom part is the only part that's left. And down there are tunnels that lead off for miles in various directions, and they're all filled with water. So I started wearing big waders and gloves so that I could fend off these spiders. And I would stand in the water, and snakes would swim between my legs. And I would walk through the Cloaca Maxima out to various places, and I was working in these sites. And this is when I first started using my own lamps, because I was working in absolute